waterways and urban functions has experienced transformations over time. So they shifted from infrastructural uses morely to more recreational purposes. And also the development of the railways and the motorways has changed the use of the waterways and their waterfronts in cities. Later, in the last century, and the last, not century, maybe 2-3 decades, ecological and also environmental concerns in terms of the urban sustainability and climate change have catalyzed a new perspective for the discourse. These are the canal and the river rehabilitation, waterfront regeneration, and regenerating the waterway transportation again. Here you can see an example from the Utrecht. It was like a canal until the 20th century, early 20th century. Later they turned into the motorized traffic, and it was like that until 2020. And then now they regained the canal because of the environmental concerns, and they want to use the whole canal system also for the transportation in a more greener way and more sustainable way. So as you can see, it's time is passing, but sometimes turning back and overlapping. Within this context, this study investigates the special and historical development of the cities and their interactions with the canals, especially the canals and waterways, and it emphasizes the role that the canals have shaping the urban fabric. In a manner, the society organizes the urban space near canals. It also conceptualizes how the urban canals adapt and evolve in relation to the urban patterns by applying an integrated urban model, which I will explain later, which utilizes the more special and historical data sets. So it aims to objectively assess and then measure it. Here is an example from the United Kingdom. The industrial areas, they were used for the industrial purposes, then turned back to like a neglected spaces. Then now they are using as a new housing spaces, It's another timeline. In different countries, different transformations, in some similar way, in some different way, is happening in the world. So to understand these more, and also to give a little bit fun and historical background, I will mention the role of water in selecting a settlement in human history. So I will mention ancient times, fertile regions, the humanities emerged, and then delta environments. Then I will turn to the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, how the canal towns emerged, especially in the Western and also some in China, and the changing impacts of the water on the urban design, the understanding of the water, and how the architects and urban designers use water and waterways as in their design and as a design approach. Then the industrialization period, and then how the canals separated, in some countries. This will be an example of the United Kingdom. By the way, this timeline is a very linear, it's a very traditional linear historical understanding, because it's just giving a historical background. So, firstly, archaeological studies have uncovered that the waterway infrastructures and the networks, and maybe we can say installations in Mesopotamia, is the first examples in the cities. Because, as you all know, Mesopotamia is described as the cradle of both Western and Eastern civilization, such as the Sumerian civilizations, Babylon, Assyrian, and Egypt. And also the meaning, Mesopotamia meaning, is between rivers. While also the Arabs name it Al Jazeera, it's translating also the between rivers in Arabic. And it's really important how also today's geography, shaped. And the first graph shows that the civilization emerged between those two rivers that provided some foundations to the written history. In the history it's written that these are the first written history civilizations emerge, and all are, can you say, related to the water, because as a human we need water, And numerous studies highlight the importance of these waters, those rivers, Tigris rivers, for the transportation and irrigation around settlements in the region, and especially during the specific periods. However, these are not just the sources of the water, but also the area developed in a significant trading center with an independent and powerful cities and settlements along the rivers, such as Ashur and then Nineveh at the beginning of the second millennium. And another one is in the Mesopotamia was the Babylon. The second and the third figure shows one of the early, we can say, urban plans of the Babylonian city. And the city is expanded both sides of the Euphrates River, and the most houses being the 3 stories tall, and the most streets running parallel or at the right angles of the river and canals. So they first decide, and here these are just the canal plans. The canals and the rivers were really important to supply the goods and trade, and also for agricultural and some infrastructural uses. Then later they divided their streets according to those canal system, and so the canal system was highly valued, and they explain in a very detailed manner also in their tablets. And another crucial region here is the Nile and the Egyptian cities. As you can see here, they were all around the Nile, and then depicts how the Egyptian culture and how the culture of those regions was very dependent on the waterways and the irrigation of the canals. And while they were having those cities, they also had many branches, and not all of them served for the agriculture. They also used some of them for the water, transportation and drainage, because they need a communication with the other part of the world and the commerce at the same time. When we came to another region, China, for example, is one of them. A group of historical towns collectively referred as the Golden Triangle in English. We have some also Chinese friends, maybe they can explain more later. Predominantly relies on the water transportation through some period of the time, and is surrounded by the rivers, lakes, and many canals. These are by the way, it's a really huge geography, yeah. Maybe you can see it's like a small, but many towns and cities emerge, and it's one of the valuable geography. It's like low countries geography, Europe, having a similar delta. It's very fertile, and the water is really important. So this triangle, Golden Triangle, is the Shanghai, Suzhou, and Hangzhou. It's good. Okay, thank you. And then they are saying the Venice of the East. Maybe we can criticize here. They always refer to Venice while mentioning those cities, but those cities maybe dates back. Maybe they are more historical than the Venice. Also for Amsterdam, they are saying that west of the Venice, and for here Venice of the East. And as illustrated in the figure 1, with over 1030 years of the history these towns have, and they have a very dense network. And here you can see some cities in the previous, some periods, Suzhou, Tang dynasties, and some various towns, old patterns. Here again, they show the street pattern and canal pattern, and the canals were more bold, because they were really important on those times, and they named the canals and how they use their street pattern or some functions, important functions, have sourced from important rivers. And the Grand Canal in China is always referred as the first longest canal in the history, and served as a basin for the commercial and capital cities in the region. And I think it's coming from here, and going to the whole region. Okay, when we turn another geography, Europe, the canals have increasingly expanded during the Middle Ages, and later industrialization period, the Low Countries, especially, why we are saying Low Countries? Because they are below the sea level, and it's generally contains the Netherlands area, some Belgium area, and especially the Netherlands is one of the earliest regions to pioneer large-scale water management and land gaining. And the Dutch saying goes that God created the world, but the Dutch created the Netherlands. So they say that, you know, we created the whole, you know, land because it was below the sea level. And the first coastal defenses date back to the 800 to 1000 years ago. Today, over the 2040 kilometers, like 1.5, you know, thousand miles of sets protected the low flat land, and nearly half of the country, half of the Netherlands, is below the sea level, and it's a huge, you know, engineering work. And then later, also the other countries, including the United Kingdom, learned a lot from the Dutch engineering, and they used their techniques during the industrialization period to gain canals. But this dates back to the medieval times. Both the architecture of the buildings and the structure of the form were driven to provide a stable foundations for the streets and the buildings, and many of the historic, you know, cities, including the Amsterdam structures, still rest on these long centuries old wooden piles, which illustrates the early stages of constructing on unstable territory. But they are doing so because those territory is very fertile, and also in the history, all these waterways provide a huge, you know, transportation and commercial, especially during the imperial time. They use those waterway transportation, and then they use this as an advantage. So during the 17th century, the Amsterdam became a global commercial hub, attracting wealthy people around the world. And the canals, the canals were primarily served drainage and water control, but they also functioned as a roads of the world, and they started to expand this waterway network for the growth of the Amsterdam prosperity. And as I mentioned, this has occurred across the whole world since the earliest civilization, particularly from the start of the, you know, medieval period. The formalization of the trading and economic system not only led to the intensive growth of expansion urban areas, but also transformed the people relationship with the waterways and the construction of the canals. And the Industrial Revolution introduced a new production model that rapidly and fundamentally changed the way societies lived. And the reflection of this change led to the redefinition of the primary use of the coastal areas and boosted the construction of the canal networks in countries, especially Europe. In the early period of the industrialization, there were no railways or motorized traffic. So they use canals as a way of transporting and new, you know, commercial roads. And the waterways became very important component of this new production model, and has been widely used in many Western, you know, countries, I can say. And United Kingdom here is one of the extensive, you know, very good example. And by 1850, England had a network of almost 6,000 kilometers connecting the four main river basins of the Severn, Mersey, Humber, and the Thames. All this allowing commercial barges to crisscross the country. So even from the Thames to the Liverpool and the Manchester, you can use the canals. And then here, now I think it's not used as a navigable way because they need to sustain it and they don't need to use them anymore. And however, on those times, canals connected and changed England's economic geography and allowing new movements of the labor, capital, and the people to and from towns and the surrounding seas, and intensifying these maritime expansion and later colonial explosion of the ventures. However, also, while globally those cities were connected through the waterways, they had a local impact. They have a local impact on some communities. So we can say some socio-economic impacts. And this shows, by the way, the whole, England Canal network. And the second one is the Charles Booth's poverty study. It is very well known. It is done or finished in 1889. And he describes the Regent's Canal, here, this one, the Regent's Canal going, as a girdle of poverty, where the populations live there, in some side of there, were suffered from poverty because they were like the families of these narrow boats, the labor. And while the north bank of the site, in the east section especially, here you can see the east section, it's to the East London. On the north side, there were more diverse mix of the buildings and the social life, he explains. Like there were like good music halls, some kind of activities, but when you came to the southern part, people were suffered from the poverty. Below means, poor and, very poor. This is what we see in cities. Those infrastructures have an impact. Also, you can see the, dividends between motorized traffic, high, motorways, or rail lines has such impact now in those cities. And this is one of the earliest example of that, because it's not just also transporting goods as a line, but it also divides two sides of the cities, especially the street network, because those systems introduced to the existing organic structure of the network lately. So it started to divide. If you cannot connect both sides, after a while, it shaped the community. One side, rich people want to live together, and they want to be isolated. And after a while, also they neglected the poor people because it affects the housing prices, rent prices, everything. And then the socio-economically low, communities started to go such places. So we can say that the canals and these industrial zones can also act as barriers or further segregating the communities. Okay. After this, historical background, if we turn back to the, study, within this, context, I research on the special and historical development of the cities and their interactions with canals, and emphasize the role that the canals have in shaping the urban fabric and the manner in which society organizes the urban spaces near canals, and apply some computational analysis methods to assess the centrality over time and examining their impact on the built form and the socio-economic patterns as they co-evolve over time, but not in a manner like descriptive way, but okay, if we assess it, is it really like that or not, as Charles, assess it socio-economically and then describe it. So, in his historical and geographical method, Konzan examined how a city form, what we mean here is a city form, its street system, plot patterns, and the building fabric evolves together. And this heralded the emergence of the morphogenesis as a mainstream approach in the urban studies. So as cities evolve, a comprehensive understanding of the urban morphology, functional dynamics, and the historical transformation becomes essential. And waterways frequently served as a primary morphological elements in his work. Driving initial settlement patterns, sometimes he mentions delimiting the districts, and sometimes acting as barriers or boundaries, as I mentioned in the Charles Booth's map. and cities expand, canals, waterways, riverfronts sometimes also become a focal point for the commercial and residential development and leaving an enduring imprint to the urban tissue, as I showed you in the one of the first slides, that the all industrial area now regenerated as a housing or new commercial areas. Secondly, I want to mention Kevin Lynch, which is another important author in this area, famously outlined the paths, edges, districts, nodes, and the landmarks as 5 key elements people use to mentally map their urban environment. So while you are walking in an urban environment, your mind mentally started to map, it started to orient yourself. These are the part of the paths, edges, districts, nodes, and landmarks. So you can recognize this area when you see the BBC Tower. This is one of the landmarks. You can mentally, start to map your space. And in this context, the waterways, canals, and the waterfronts in his study can function simultaneously at edges, boundaries between districts, and or paths, the corridors of the movement, because not just the canals, also towpaths area now used as a pedestrian area in many cities. So it makes city memorable for you, and help to define city's form in your mind. And when we came to the Christopher Alexander works named The Pattern Language, significantly contributes to understanding of the urban environment, more a cohesive, more interlinked entities, and challenging the traditional notions of the isolated urban elements. So instead of thinking the urban elements as an isolated things, Kevin Lynch focuses on that. On the human scale patterns, places and functions well because they are connected to each other. And then he underscores the synergy between the natural elements, including the waterways and canals in my context, and the built environment that the humans constructed. So in this context, in his late studies, Alexander proposed that the structure of a natural city, here while saying nature is not the nature of the city, but the nature of the city's nature, resembles a semi-lattice, where various components are interconnected in a complex manner, thereby establishing a unique orders and relationships. So if I mention here what is semi-lattice, it's not like a tree structure, as you can see here. These are tree structure there is a one main branch, then its branches, and all those branches are branches. But cities are not like a tree. He mentions 3 branches, but also some branches are connected to each other. So it's like a semi-lattice structure. Okay, why I mention all of these? Because these are the fundamentals of the understanding of form and geometry itself. And when we came to the space syntax theory in 1990s, it is founded on the 2 fundamental propositions. One is space is not just a background to human activity, but it's intrinsic to it. So also it defines how we perceive the space, geometry of space. So it's not just a background of it, it defines something. And space, secondly, space first and foremost configurational. In other words, what happens in any individual space, it could be a room, corridor, street, public space, green space, is fundamentally influenced by the relationships between that space and the network of the space to which is connected. So I think it's not complicated. As you can see here, these are the open spaces in again, London. Okay, what happened here, if you change the structure of here, also change something here, because these are all connected to the part of these network. These are all connected to each other. Okay, but how can we understand those relationships? First, we need to represent the space. If we say it's not background and if we say there are relationships, etc., if we want to assess it, you need the way of represent it, geometrically or mathematically. You need a language to represent it. So in space syntax theory, special elements are presented through their geometric forms and how people experience them. So they can be, a point. Sometimes, we can say that the squares are the point and the streets can be a lines, then they are connected in that way, or a line or segment. This can be just one singular line from here to here, or just a segment for each street can be present. Or convex space, it's kind of a here, one closed convex space. Or isovist. Isovist mean the area you can see. You have a kind of a depth and a vision, and what I'm seeing is my isovist area. So I can define the space according to my isovist area as well. After those representation, we can analyze the relationships between special elements resulting from their configuration, and these relationships can be objectively analyzed using various measures included among the which is mentioned in space syntax theory, integration and choice. So integration here is based on it's not a new thing, based on the closeness centrality by Sabidusi. It's in the network theory, complexity and network theory. It measures how close each segment to all others under the definition of the distance in the entire system or within the predetermined distance. So you can say the whole city can be your distance, and you can measure it, or you can just define, okay, 500 kilometers, I will look at more on local scale. And this is the integration pattern of the London, street. As you can see, those areas are the most integrated one. And here the distance can be a metric distance, can be an angular distance as well. So how angular turn can cost something, because while we are moving in a city, okay, metric is important, but if you don't have any technological things or something like that, also people are tend to move forward, and the vision is really important while you are turning. So you can also measure the whole area according to angular distances. When we came to the choice, it's based on between the centrality by Freeman. It measures how likely it can be a line or street segment is to be passed through all the shortest roads from all the spaces to other spaces. So while calculating from everywhere to everywhere, what about these streets and how many times these streets on the shortest path? And this is the closeness centrality. And again, this could be also metric, this could be an angular, and also you can define the whole city or a scale you can give. This is the main to measure. Within this context, to investigate the impact of the waterways on the growth pattern of the city is, firstly I model my case study areas, street, this is the street, and waterway network, okay? And then I combine two of them together through their moving places, interfaces, link them, and then measure them accordingly to assess their impact on the growth pattern. Is there any impact or not? I also use the building and land use data. This can also be linked to the those street or waterway system in JS environment, and this is called multi-layered network model, integrated element model. You can integrate. These also can be used for the railways, how the railways impact the centrality patterns of because we don't only use streets anymore. You can going to outside from your home, walking a little bit, taking a tube and coming here. So the centrality of the here is not only depend on a street network, but how you come through the railways also have an impact. So I model 6 periods of Amsterdam 13th century, 16th century, 17th century, 19th, 20th, and the present. These are the oldest map I can find, and I drove all of them in JS environment, and all were like just the historical maps, and I digitized their street, the brownish yellowish one, and then the red ones are the waterway, their waterway network, and the blue ones are the major mooring places. I connect them just to understand how the streets were integrated to the waterway, and if there any impact on a functional distribution of cities, and what happened if today we implement canals or the waterways systems to the street system, if they change some areas integration so that we can efficiently use the waterway, not just for a people's movement, but also carrying goods. It's really huge impact in the energy consumption of the cities. Today they use generally motorized traffic, and there are such ideas to use waterways for carrying goods today, and I assess if it's feasible or not, in which areas can benefit from it. Okay, firstly, before these results, I also look at the boundaries of the today's cities between the periods, and look at what was the growth pattern. And then when we first look at the built-up area and how the city expanded over periods, the first graph showed the built-up area kilometers square between periods. And as you can see, there is a huge jump, huge construction happened from 1950s today. It's worldwide happening. The cities are growing, populations are growing, but cities are really growing. And while the city had a 28 kilometers square built-up area in 1950s, today it has 279 kilometers square. Okay, but what about the network? What about the relationship of those networks? And the last one shows some of the street, waterway, and bridge segment length of the Amsterdam per period. And this shows that while the street and waterways were increasing in ratio to each other until the 20th century, in the last century, streets surpassing to the canal additions. So they built many streets. They also use new technological developments to control the water, but it's also very discussable now in the Netherlands because of the climate change. They can need maybe these old canals again to control the water because the sea level is increasing, and all those built-up areas based on the streets means that they are like concrete additions. It's also affect the heat of the cities. And maybe we can close these to make it. Sorry, it's more visible in the black, but maybe just these three. Yeah, okay. I think it's more visible. Okay. When the city continues to grow, here the analysis integration patterns, what I told you of the Amsterdam, it is from 13th century. I can say that it is not clear which period is belong to the first map. They are saying 13th, 14th century. This is the 16th century, 17th century, 19th century, and this is 20th and contemporary. First one, just the analysis results of the street network, and the second one when we integrate the waterways. Okay, and I'm trying to just assess if the centrality pattern is changed, and while growing, how the canal expansion impact on the street, and I can say that the extension of the city until the 16th period can be defined as a free extension, which is, as you can see, it's very organic, not like a planned parallel thing. The Amstel River is defining the city form itself, okay? And it's always referred as an onion-like, even the waterways. It's extended onion-like. And here is the main market, Nieuwe Market. If you've been in Amsterdam, probably you know. And while it is really segregated from the street network, and it's not common, generally the marketplace is mostly integrated from the street in terms of, it became really integrated when we add to the waterways. So yeah, it's not a surprising thing. Probably they're taking goods through waterways, and then these became the most integrated one because of that they selected this area. And okay, but they added a canal district, and these were the Jordan area, and it was the informal settlements emerged. The city became a very popular. So migration also happened, and then also during those periods, those areas started to emerge even outside of the city walls. People came here because there were money and many facilities. Then later they decided to add new streets, and they decided to expand the city, and rich people did it. They paid for it. Okay. These were the main expansion plan, but it didn't emerge suddenly. They did first phase like that, and they said that okay, we can include both the informal settlement, and then they designed these area for merchants and for rich people. So it was more later it became also for the working class families, and these were the for poor people, and it was like the again, I said that informal settlement. And when we look at also the pattern, it was like segregated again. The blue means less segregated. I didn't mention it. Red means most segregated. Oh, there is no legend here. Okay. And whilst the growing, can you see the historic core became segregated and more segregated? This onion-like shape. However, the 20th and the 17th and 19th century expansion became still a most segregated one in the later periods as well. And then this area is called as a canal district and one of the UNESCO's World Heritage Area. And if you have been in Amsterdam, probably you know this area. It's the most commercial, and now is the mostly retails are there. And as you can see, it's again the most integrated one. Okay, no. Yeah, this one can use even the street network, because it connects to all islands and connects to the outer with the inner circle. While the old historic core, I can say, segregated over time, when we add the canals into the street segment, it became really connected. So it's more of a genesis, and it's integration really depending on the waterway networks, I can say. By the way, this is like a potential moment. I mean, while saying moment here, I mean that potentially, if you are connected to more streets, potentially you can face more movement, Then, as I told you, this core is really important and still remaining more integration than others. I closely look at the canal district of the Amsterdam and its functional distribution as a first stage, but I will look at the whole I'm looking to whole Amsterdam, but today I will just mention this part. As you can see, the streets run diagonal to the canals, those streets. These are, by the way, the red dots is the retail units of the Amsterdam. They have such, data they are collecting. And this is the whole land use distribution. Colors are not, very visible, but here you can see businesses, community services, education, health facilities, industry, some mixed use, and then retails, recreation, infrastructures. This is the whole one, and I just took the retail ones. Okay, and I found that, can you see the diagonal streets, which is, we can also see the bridge streets because those are connecting the islands, and has a higher retail density. And when we look at the space syntax analysis results of the parallel and the diagonal one closely, I didn't put here in detail, but here, but not from the whole system, but just taking the part. The diagonal one, bridge street, shows the higher integration than the parallel one, and probably because of that the retail distribution happened like that, as you can see the retail density. And the whole area is now used, more than half of them, for the retails. And this is published in Urban Planning Journal. There are more discussion about also the land use diversity, because not just the retail units, but also how diverse a street is really important. So I measured the land use diversity by using Shannon's diversity index, which is commonly used in biology to understand how diverse in an ecological environment, taking each spaces, and there is a calculation. And the parallel streets use more in a more diverse way now, because the canals, like the focal point as a more recreational purposes, so they use for housings, they use for museums, more health facilities, and more recreational, especially more recreational areas. So as a conclusion, I can summarize this until now. Significance of the research into two, maybe part, as a scientific and social relevance. For the scientific relevance of the study, an integrated network model for the historical investigation brings together the concepts and also the techniques from different disciplines and different research communities to provide more detailed description of those processes, and this can lead a formation and transformation of the urban landscape. For the social relevance of the study, the current travel patterns, generally based on the extensive use of the automobile, have negative implications in various areas of the environment, and also for the society and the economy. And in the recent years, the concern, as I mentioned, with the sustainability, green mobility, the increase in the use of public transport and walking has manifested itself in a policy and planning actions for the waterway transportation. Therefore, this integrated network model implemented in a geographic information system can be a suitable tool also for planning, support planning in the process of strategically planning our movement in the cities. So this approach also can be used for in many cities, also in some Turkish cities like Istanbul, if you integrate the waterway transportation for the Bosphore effectively, how it can change the overall movement pattern of the people can be assessed through those methods. Accordingly, strategic planning can be applied. This can be also applied to Stockholm now, or London as well. This work is also exhibited within the PhD research project 2025 at the Bartlett School of Architecture, UCL. It's very close to here until the 11th of March, and it's very close here, just the parallel streets. And you can go and visit the exhibition. It also includes other doctoral students, amazing works. Some are related, some are not. These are from the different streams of doctoral programs, from theory to computation and history. And thank you for listening.
Small correction and the question.
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing, but you mentioned it was called Al Jazeera, but it's between rivers. Al Jazeera is the Saudi Arabia now, but not Iraq. Iraq is Mesopotamia, so Al Jazeera is not Iraq. Al Jazeera is called about Saudi and surrounding of Saudi.
Okay. You mean today's reference or?
You mentioned that they call it Al Jazeera, the Mesopotamia.
Terminologically, it's written like that.
Oh, I'm not sure. But
I mean, the Al Jazeera, terminologically coming from the whole region, because the two rivers were feeding the whole region, starting from Turkey and going to the Saudi Arabia.
Maybe. My question,
maybe because of that, but I don't know very well Arabic, so maybe you can be right. This is what I read and then put it in.
You may be right as well.
Okay. Because Mesopotamia is coming from the Greek.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Arabic, we don't say Mesopotamia, we say between rivers, as you said.
Yeah.
ما بين النهرين.
Yeah.
The foundation, you said piles. What is the material of wood? What kind of wood? The piles.
I don't know the exact materials of that. I don't know which woods they use. Because I mean, I went to Amsterdam as well, and I visited the museum, Canal District Museum. But I didn't notice if they also specify a specific wood. And probably, maybe they are coming from other regions. And then, yeah, because I'm not studying the architectural styles of those, foundations of the building. So probably they used one specific wood, but sorry, I don't know. Maybe, yeah, we can check.
So, first of all, thank you. It was very informative and full of details. And so I'm gonna ask. So you touched upon the history, how this state grew, and I'm gonna ask about the future and your perspective. So so you worked on Amsterdam, and you mentioned streets, and Amsterdam and Netherlands. They have a kind of a unique attributes that we don't observe in any other place in the world. Like they like to cycle. So have you done any research on, like, is there any effect of their like a cycle lines, cycle infrastructures to get your results, like a really huge increase in the street network? And also, have you done any kind of comparison between different cities? If that street growing streets like only for Amsterdam, maybe because of that, because they're keen to use bicycles. And this is my first question. And second question, your perspective in the future of cities.
Okay. Your first question, it's there are studies just integrating the land movement, but integrating street network, motorized street network with pedestrian network and the cycling, and then trying to understand the impact of the, how they put more bus lines or how they increase the, their cycling path, etc., will an impact on it. But here in Amsterdam case, it's a lowland and it's a flat. So, and each street can be used for walking and cycling as well. They have such a bit. So in my study, instead of like making a tree line, it increases the network density and changes the measure. We just simplify, because those are the representation of an open spaces. So just representation of what you are moving, Also as you can see here, I eliminated some movement details, the circles, etc., because in the analysis it increases the angular turns, so then it makes a more angular turn and make more segregated area. It's very technical, but because of that, while modeling it, we try to use more simplified model. So those streets also a representation of the cycling and the walking, but for the Amsterdam case. For example, if you want to do in Turkey, it could be different, because just some street used just for cars. So you need to add the pedestrian or cycling, we don't have, but also even for London, the cycling paths sometimes suddenly finishes, or you can use the motorized area. But first you need to go and observe, then you can add those lines. But here in this case, No, we used very simplified model because it can be used for cycling and walking as well. But for the cycling pattern, maybe it could be very detailed, but we are also looking for the how a street is globally connected and locally connected, and is there any correlation between it. So while an area is locally very integrated, it can be globally segregated as well, or it can be globally integrated, locally segregated. We say is a less intelligible. Okay, and in Amsterdam case, the most intelligible scales is for the global 2,500. For the local case 500. I look at. I didn't put it here because it's too detailed. So it means that the areas at the Amsterdam global scale is kind of a cycling. 15-20 minute cycling. The city global thing is define itself. So if you look at the 2,500 circular results, is corresponding to its 500 local thing. So they are very intelligible. So also the result shows that okay, it's kind of a cycling and walking space. For example, in London, it's not like that. It's much more 5,000. If you analyze the whole London, more than 5,000 corresponding to 1,000, for example, because it's still a huge movements happen. I think, yeah, and also continue to your first thing. I look at the traditional Dutch cities. Then I will compare with the British cases and with the Birmingham. Because the Birmingham canal network is also very integrated and like a network structure. For example, London, it's more linear. We can also compare how the linear and this network-like structure behaved, and then how they can. It can be another subject. But in these studies, I will compare Amsterdam, The Hague, and the Delft. These are three different sizes traditional cities. So while Amsterdam expanded hugely, The Hague didn't expand it after the industrialization period, The Hague, but the Delft is like a town city. It expanded until the 17th period, and it's still the similar. Not much change happened. I first look at those, expansion. Then I will compare, okay, how the waterway network corresponding different growth patterns. Then move to the Birmingham case. Then maybe I will compare Hague, or I will compare Amsterdam with the Birmingham. Then what can we learn between this comparison? What was your second? Sorry.
Your perspective on future.
Yeah, I can say that this research can help both our historical understanding, which is sometimes very theoretical and then very descriptive, try to understand. But when you analyze something and measure something, you can have a more wider perspective, then you can reflect the future. So those cities are, North European cities, and they have data. Then you can easily, not just the street or waterway network data, but you know how many people are cycling on the street, how many cars, they have some traffic data. So, maybe after this research, I can compare this, making some correlations, and then move to the more other data dispersed cities. What can we do for other cities? Maybe like in Turkey, because I'm from Turkey, and then maybe learning from those techniques, then reflect on to other cities, and if we strategically plan, not just the motorized traffic, okay, because now it's going crazy and everyone finding a solution like individual cars and something like that. So not just waterway networks, also okay, you are planning a railway. Okay, but what could be those railway into your whole network centrality? Or if you, this is by the way is based on just metric distance, but you can use time, capacity cost. I will also use time, so you can go from somewhere through cycling or through waterway transportation, then walking, for example. Then you can assess different distance types then instead of analyzing the previous period, you can analyze your plan as well. So it can be kind of a guidance for policy making or something like that. But I don't have any in touch with those people. But it can, improve.
Thank you, Merve. I think it was a really clear presentation with theoretical, historical background, methodology. I have no idea about space syntax, but I think I understood the main logic, I can say. I have two complementary questions. I'm going to play the devil a little bit. So we say space syntax and in general computational methods are objective, right? So the analysis is objective because we are using mathematics to do it.
Yeah.
But there is also data collection. So what I was going to ask, because I have no idea about it, is there any difference between you collecting the data and doing the model and me? Or someone else,
functions?
In terms of the validity of the model, in terms of your biases, your own reflection on it, about the data collection and create. For example, you are creating the model of the Amsterdam. If I do that, do you think there will be huge differences if I look at the same maps and same data? So, or is it same? I mean, if you just do it, everyone else can use it and they don't have to do it again. And connected to it is the second question, is what are you thinking about the limitations of these methodologies, any downsides, because any methodology can have small side.
Of course. In terms of the objectivity and the difference between I think it's not personal, if I understand, because it's the definition of the convex space, definition of the street segment is very clear. For functional data, they don't look at how I perceive this area. For those data is collected from generally municipalities or some institutions related to them. They are going and looking if there's a retail, it's retail. And in the data, it's a huge data, by the way, for the England, for the ordnance survey, they are surveying. And they even write the name of the retail, when it opened, if it's closed. They are going regularly, so they can get an update data. And if it's closed, it's written. And then if it's church, not just the function like religious, is it mosque or church? It's a huge data. So I think it's kind of an objective thing. But of course, which retail is important, or which institution. Here can also the institution, university is also institution. Sorry. So if you want to do a more in detail analysis, like impact of the universities, you can do it. Or you can just use institution as an institution. You can classify it. So it depends on what you are looking for. So it also creates a limitation. For example, some people are just looking fast food chains, not retails, fast food chains. I know some studies just looking for coffee shops, and there's kind of a Starbucks effect, for example. Not just the configuration create movement. Sometimes they are looking if the attraction creates movement, and the relationship between them. So yes, the data is objective, but how you deal with the data, it's also the researchers, within the researcher's definition. So I can say that this could be the limitation of the study. And you can always trust the data. If the data is wrong, what could we do? We cannot collect such amount of data. This is a smaller one, but there's a big for the cities. And just one person, you cannot, also you cannot calculate such network integration in a human. Because of that, it's computation, And also does not reflect the real movement. We say potential movement. But there are studies that making a correlation between the real traffic data with the space syntax results, and it's like more than 70% in European cities, I can say. I know from Germany, they did also for London, they did for Sweden and the Netherlands, and for cities, if you if its correlation is more than 70%, it means a lot for cities, because it's like very organic, and you cannot assume which people can go which places, because also it depends on your everyday habits. You can go 5 times after the school, 5 times a week you can go to the home, but 2 times to another place you can meet your friends, etc. But if we can measure these 5 times, it means something for us to design something. But at the same time, it's the limitation, according to those, computational capacity of today's development. It's like that. Maybe in the future, with machine learnings or everything, we can, assess more.
Thanks, Merve.
Yeah.
I want to understand what a successful city looks like. Is there a success criteria in integration? Which colors are good? Which kind of a pattern would be perceived as positive? Is Amsterdam well integrated compared to, I don't know, Brussels? How can we interpret this map with colors? Thank you.
Okay. I think it's really good question. Yeah, what makes a design good is like a very broad, question. I can say that it depends on your needs, and then what makes a good and bad, it's also depending on how the communities are coming together, etc. So, for the cultural activities and for more social activities, we need a segregated spaces. Yeah, we don't want to be like in a very busy road. We don't select the busy road, environment, or near the busy road as a home. Yeah, we don't want it. But at the same time, we need some needs. So while going somewhere, we can just go to some supermarket or something like that, or think like you are a retailer. You need more footprint, yeah? So both of them, being a red and being a, blue, means something. You need combination of it, maybe I can say. And then to define it, this is just an analytical tool. You need to look at the other perspective, the social and how the population, as I told you, for the regions canal, it's somehow bad if you segregate communities, rich people living together, and it's coming from the configuration, that you need to implement some design approaches to make the segregated communities more integrated. But they are segregated also locally, not globally. Globally segregating in a neighborhood could be good, but if you're also locally segregated, it means that your area cannot be reached from others easily, so it's less visible. You are less visible, so you are also lack of the services and many things.
What is the scale of global? When you say global, should I understand?
It depends. For example, for Amsterdam, 2,500 could be a global. It depends on the size of the city. If it's a huge city, global means 10,000 meters. Yeah, meters. But if it's like Dev city, from somewhere to somewhere is maximum, I think, 2,000 meters. So also it depends on the size, and for big cities, I think for Shanghai, it's totally different. And how people live there, also their local and global, means different than what Amsterdam. If you put some, Amsterdam people in Shanghai, probably they were like, but the people living in Shanghai, they get used to it. And how they move and how they arrange their daily life, it depends on the scale. It's also very depending on the perception and how the infrastructures are organized.
Hi. I also have a question for the future, and it's also a very regional question. We have been talking about canals, obviously, and there's a grant project called Canal Istanbul in Turkey.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could shed some light on the significance of it and how it will potentially impact the fabric of the city.
It will definitely have an impact, but I need to model it. I need a data to talk about it. So I don't know, but definitely it will impact it because as I told you, even the Regent's Canal, they introduced and it's segregated in somewhere, but not segregated other ways. In East London, it's segregating because there is less bridges. So how many bridges you construct also impacts, on how you connect the north and south area. So I look at the Canal Istanbul, but the plan, it was from the newspapers, etc. So I don't know the real plan, from which where to which where they connect. I need a detailed plan of it. It was just like a, painting, drawing, So I don't know. I think in Istanbul case, it will affect the growth pattern of the cities probably, because new things, happened. But definitely it will impact. It will affect. Because of that, they have such projects, yeah. But of course, it can be analyzed. Why not? There are many tools, including space and tax. Yeah. But I don't know the project, so I cannot comment more on it. I think it's not clear now, as I know.
We'll take one last question.
Thank you for the presentation. I just wonder if you have focused on your study about some social impact of the network over the society, and if you can give us some examples, if you have focused on these aspects.
Yeah, for maybe Amsterdam, I can say that, as I told you, the Jordan area, they were informal settlements, and they suffered from healthy environment as well, and they needed to close some canals because of their unhealthy situations, because they use canals for their rubbish, etc. And then they had to close some canals as well. But there are also such ideas, maybe to open some canals, not Amsterdam, but also The Hague. They also did similar things at Utrecht. Now they wanna recanalize the city again, but after a while they became really integrated, as you can see here, and it is discussed as a gentrification, which is we are seeing in many cities, a gentrified area. How can I explain this? It became more accessible and more, integrated. More people are coming, so the land became more valuable. So it started to transform and regenerated by the landowners or something like that. And the community living there need to move in other places, because they cannot afford the rent, etc. And it's saying that it's a gentrification. So also the growth pattern, the configuration, and the change of the centrality also changed the social pattern of the city. So Jordan is one of them. It's a very beautiful place, by the way, if you go to Amsterdam. It's coming from the Jardin French, gardens. They have kind of very micro gardens, and it's really lovely and it's very central. You can find very creative spaces, retail units, etc. But one of the valuable in terms of housing prices area. So it's not like an informal area anymore.
Thank you, Merve. Thank you everyone for coming. You can now feel free to enjoy refreshments and ask Merve any more questions.